Hey guys, Bluewater Johnny here, John Cahill. I want to address the elephant in the room, and that's Malosi lures. Are they actually fantastic lures, or is this just a massive hype built on good marketing? Stick around and find out. So before we dive in too deep, welcome to my channel, Bluewater Johnny Fishing. This is a place where I'm going to do my trip videos, my expeditions, my daily vlogs style fishing, but also at the suggestion of my good mate Joe Edlington, Jay Wilds, I'm going to review gear. And the way I'm going to do it is not so much from the point of view of here's a new product, this looks good or whatever. I'm only going to review gear that I've actually put some significant time into fishing, and that might be like one really solid day, or that might be a whole season or months at least of use before I form a strong opinion. So stick around, there'll be a playlist specifically around these reviews, and check out the fishing videos while you're at it too. So Malosi lures, there's a stack of hype around the work of Jon and Niko. You know, if you go back probably about 5 or 6 years, the whole Malosi story became kind of public. The guys started posting videos online of their lure making process, and it really caught my attention back then. It was slick. They were good looking lures, but they were really professionally made videos that just showcased the lure making process, and they caught your eye. I'm pretty sure some of those videos absolutely went viral. The timber lures look fantastic. I've got one here, a Vader. Absolutely amazing looking piece of work. It's as well finished as any lure you will find out there. I personally haven't myself swum the timber lures, but I've seen them swum, and they swim absolutely beautiful. But I guess any lure brand eventually strikes this problem of they get popularity, but then they can't make enough, and it becomes a profitability exercise. The customers get frustrated that they can't access a lure, so how do you scale your business? And that's certainly what it seems like the Malosi boys have done. You've still got the premium timber range, but they've put significant work, like I'd say years of work, in developing the Staple series, which was launched at AFTA in 2025. The hype I spoke about at the front end of this video was most evident at this year's AFTA and the previous year at 2024. I was at both AFTAs with the brands that I work with, and the hype around that booth was just insane. You know, partly it's to do with Jay Wilds and Briggsy being, you know, pro team members or ambassadors for the brand and their huge popularity. But it was more than that. It's the way these guys presented their booth, the way their art shone through in their production. This wasn't just another fishing brand putting its products to market. This was clearly the establishment of a movement or a tribe being put out there. And 100% it worked. And I would say both years, the Malosi booths and the hype around their brand would be the absolute envy of every brand at AFTA. Even the big tackle houses would be going, how do we get a piece of that? That's for the big tackle brands to work out, but Jon and Niko and their team have done a pretty stunning job of establishing that, and absolute hats off to them. They're lovely guys, really nice, genuine people. Worked clearly very, very hard, and they're super talented. So on to the Staple series. There's a bunch of lures in the range. Floating stickbait, the Chieftain, sinking stickbait, the Rogue, the Hero, the diving bib minnow, and the Tarlo, and what's the popper's name? Forget it. So Tarlo diving popper, and right now I can't think of the traditional popper. I actually don't. It's the one I don't have a Hero, and I don't have one of the traditional poppers. I've got pretty much every other lure I mentioned. There's a bunch of sizes from 160 up to about the 210 mil range in not in every product. I'm winging it there saying that, but for the most part, this review is actually about the Chieftain. So onto the Chieftain. A floating stick bait is the absolute cornerstone of I would say, every topwater angler's arsenal, saltwater topwater angler at least. The other would be, you know, a traditional popper. So the Chieftain, there's a Chieftain 95, gorgeous looking lure, really, really beautiful, classic, longer, thinner profile, not super thin, but you know, beautiful looking thing, well constructed from multi-piece ABS. From what I can tell, there's obviously at least 2 pieces, but I think there's internal pieces of the ABS as well. I need to break one open to be sure. You've obviously got your through wiring and you've got your internal weights. So through wiring is probably the first big tick, that you can throw this at true trophy fish, and even if the lure self-destructs and falls apart, the through wiring will hold it together, and your lure might go in the bin, but you get your fish. But from what I've seen, these lures are actually pretty tough. So BKK rings and hooks, which are tuned to each of the lure sizes. I'll slide on over to this bad boy, which is, I swam every size of the Chieftain on a recent trip to New Zealand, a land-based trip. A little bit of boat, but mostly land-based. And this bad boy here, which is really scuffed up, certainly not, you know, in a scenario of beyond repair, but you can tell there's not anything in the way of chips out of it, but there is a lot of scuffs, a lot of scrapes, and that is largely from the environment that I used it in, off the rocks and bouncing it up. You know, sometimes it gets washed, and you lift as you're winding, and you don't clear the rocks. So you know they cop an absolute battering. But great terminals, great durability. It has certainly stood up. Even pleasing to see that, not that I care a stack about things like eyes, but it speaks to durability that the eyes are still in place. And we're talking about a lure here that got tied on and off a lot over a 4 or 5 day period. The swim of this thing, so in talking about a floating stick bait being a cornerstone of a topwater angler's arsenal, for me it's a particular type of stick bait, and that is a lure that can swim in all conditions, can take a variety of angler inputs, and isn't too rhythmic, isn't too predictable in its swim. Often the difference for me in attracting a fish and then getting that fish to eat is an erratic action. So if you think of a lure with a bib that you're trolling behind a boat, or you're just flat winding in, it's constant. It doesn't do anything different unless perhaps we twitch and pause or impart some angler erratic behaviour. What I like to see in a stick bait is that classic S action, but a lure that will, without additional input, other than your sweeps or twitches, will dive under, will come back up, will breathe, will slash on the surface before biting again and swimming. And for me, it's that erratic nature to the action without it just being a lure that skips over the surface, because face it, any lure can do that. That makes the difference to it being a real fish raiser and a fish catcher. So fishing off the rocks from an elevated platform in at some stages a thumping current, at some stages a significant swell. I was pretty stoked to see this lure really behave, really spend most of its time actually in the water and not blowing out. Of course, it will blow out. Show me a lure that is made, it will blow out at some point. If you're putting, any speed on the lure at all. But it did a fantastic job of staying in. It responded super well to a variety of inputs, from your classic sweeps to your twitches and darts and stabbing of the rod tip, all with great results. at the other end. Jay Walls was using Chieftains a fair bit himself, and he was using a variety of single hook combinations that it did really well with the singles. You know, I guess dual trebles, you're going to get the best performance out of a lure generally. And I didn't deviate from the twin trebles, but Joe did muck around with singles, and it did really well, did super well. So we had super tough fishing. It wasn't easy. We probably had one of those bites where there weren't a ton of fish around, and what we raised were kind of lazy lookers. We were looking for big kings off the rocks, obviously. And yeah, sometimes we'd raise fish that were not charging in, being pretty lethargic. For me, the one solo bite I got on this trip was a very committed king of about 1.20 metre fork length, which would be close to 1.30 metre total length. Great fish, personal best fish off the rocks for me on this very lure. So am I biased because it caught me a great fish? It certainly helps, doesn't it? But I'm rating this review more on what I saw in the water. I was confident enough to give this lure a significant amount of water time because I was confident in it. You know, when there's a hot bite, you can tie nearly anything on and probably get a fish. But this was a scenario where we weren't on a hot bite. We were very far from a hot bite, and it did super good. So down to the nitty gritty of it, Malosi Lures Staple series, in particular the Chieftain. Is it a hype bait? Absolutely not. It's a gun bait. And I think, you know, the 120 gram at the biggest end of the range, I think is a $60 lure rigged. That's hard to beat. That's super hard to beat. The guys have done very, very well. The way they package their products is amazing. The way they've presented this with quality terminals for $60, that's a pretty easy decision in my opinion. So get a big thumbs up from me. 100% not a hype bait, 100% the real deal. So check them out. I've got some more reviews lined up real soon, but for this first one, for the Malosi Staple Series Chieftain, it's absolutely 2 thumbs up. Get into them.